John Hook's Newsmaker starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker. Arizona is set to resume carrying out executions. Governor Hobbs and Attorney General Chris Mays, both Democrats, suspended capital punishment upon taking office in 2022, and they ordered a full review of how we administer the death penalty in Arizona, which, as you know, is by lethal injection or the gas chamber, if that's an option given to the convicted. I'm joined now by retired U.S. Magistrate Judge David Duncan, who was tasked with overseeing that review and was fired by the governor before he could complete his report. Judge Duncan, thanks for making the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Judge, why, first of all, did the governor pull the plug on a review that I think was in process for 2 years?
John, I can't know the answer to that question because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The work product that I had provided to her in the draft outline, which was she asked for, which was to tell her where I was headed, gave her information that was inchoate. It was about to be put into the final product, and she took this initial information and distorted it in a strange sort of way, and she did it on the eve of the production of the final report. That didn't seem to make any sense to me because one of the 3 goals that she had tasked me with in her executive order was to increase transparency, and it seems to be the opposite of increasing transparency to shut down a report. I don't understand why she simply didn't say, I have a report from the director of the Department of Corrections. I'm going to look at that and may well accept those recommendations and move forward with executions, but I'll still wait to hear what Judge Duncan has to say at the end of the year because he may bring something useful to the table. Instead of doing that, she terminated it and also said I wasn't up to the task, and she lost confidence in me. And she also tried to make it as if I had tried to steer her into a place she couldn't go, and that was with the firing squad. I thought it was a authorized work because I had met with her lawyers 2 weeks before, in which they wrote me an email in which they said it was perfectly okay for me to make recommendations. At that point, when that email was exchanged, I was seriously concerned about whether or not lethal injection could be safely used in Arizona because the team that they had hired to do the executions upcoming was a team that they would not allow me to interview or allow me to watch a dry run that is a full dry run, a rehearsal that ends in the injection of saline into one of the Department of Corrections workers. For me, a process that had produced botches, and the botches all occurred in this final application of the process, it made enormous sense for me to be able to interview the people and to talk to them. But they said no, because the people wouldn't do it if I talked to them. Why? Because they were fearful that I would reveal their identities. It's against the law.
And it seems like they cut the legs out from under you because they didn't like what you were about to say. So they tried to discredit you, like the firing squad point. You were making a point that if you want certainty, the firing squad might be more certain than a lethal injection, which has been a little bit iffy here in Arizona.
Well, John, that's a fair comment and a fair observation, and one that not only that I made, but also the scholars who have studied this have unanimously determined that lethal injection just isn't workable. You would think it is. It intuitively seems like it is because we see it all the time at our veterinary hospitals when we put our beloved pets down. It's seamless. It goes well. The problem is it doesn't translate to humans for,
Why is that?
For really. Well, 3 reasons. The first is we can't get the right drugs. The manufacturers of the best drugs will not allow them to be used for executions. The second reason is we can't get the right people. The best person is an anesthesiologist. If they participate in a execution, they will lose their board certification and they will not be able to enter a hospital and practice their craft. The third reason is there is so much secrecy associated with every aspect of lethal injection. No one ever learns from mistakes.
Let me ask you a couple of things. This is such an interesting subject. There are 14 states currently using pentobarbital. It's a sedative. It's commonly used to euthanize pets, as you just mentioned. Again, 14 states use it. The feds use it for federal executions. It seems to me we've unnecessarily complicated this whole thing with an exotic cocktail of drugs, 3 drugs often, to kill the condemned. Why can't, if, as you said, if we can put down dogs, which we do sadly by the thousands every day in this country, why can't we do this in an easier fashion?
Well, it is because we can't get access to trained people to do it. It's not just the anesthesiologist who will be supervising the process. It'll be the nurse equivalent type person who will be inserting the lines. And inserting the lines is a very different task.
So they would be violating their Hippocratic oath to do no harm?
For me, it's pretty simple. It says, I will do no harm, and it also says later on in the long version, I will not use a lethal poison to end life. So for people who follow the Hippocratic Oath, it is a problem. Now, there are people who don't find that, and they think that if it's going to be done, if there is going to be an execution, I at least want it to be done well, so I will sign up to do it. And that's why you have doctors do it. And it is something that is needing doctors. But the problem is, the best doctors for it, anesthesiologists.
What about phlebotomists?
Pardon me?
Phlebotomists.
Well, actually, if you know a phlebotomist and you ask them, what about you doing this? They say, actually, what phlebotomists do is we take liquids out. We draw blood. We're not allowed to put anything in. A nurse would be better for putting in a line. A doctor would be better for doing a cut down. And the difficulty is you don't know whether you're getting somebody who has that experience because nobody knows what the skill set is of these people except for the Department of Corrections. And the problem is when they do the internal review, they're grading their own papers, and that's never a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it strikes me now, what you're kind of laying out is more than the exotic cocktail of drugs. It may be getting people who are qualified to actually carry out the death penalty with a lethal injection. That seems to be a bigger hang-up, actually, than the exotic drugs. Am I hearing you correctly?
Well, it's both. I mean, for instance, Arizona uses pentobarbital, so it's not a cocktail anymore. It used to be, but the problem is we get that from a compounder, somebody who is not a traditional manufacturer of the drug. They're given the recipe, come up with the recipe, and then we have to test it. Nobody knows who the compounder is. Nobody knows who the tester is.
You know, I think back to, let's just take the Heaven's Gate cult suicide down in San Diego. Back in the early 90s. Those guys, I mean, 18 of them took their own lives with a combination of phenobarbital, put in pudding, and a vodka chaser, and that did it. I can't believe we can't come up with a method to execute prisoners that is not so crazy and difficult. It doesn't seem that hard.
Well, if you think through it, you run into stumbling blocks a lot of times. For instance, you mentioned an oral component. That's very difficult to do with somebody who doesn't want to die. Some people think that the firing squad is violent, but the truth is every execution of someone who doesn't want to die will be a violent action because taking a life from a human organism, the organism itself doesn't want to die, the will of the person doesn't want to die. And so in your hypothetical, it's voluntary consumption of poisons, sure, that can work, but we also don't know in that situation, is it what we would want to happen as responsible people if we are executing people? I think the couple of things we want to have happen, we want it to be quick, we want it to be painless, and we want it to work every single time. We have a track record across Arizona, across the country, but also in Arizona, where that has not been the case. It has not been seamless, and it is.
Okay, what if we, and I have been advocating this for a long time.
But practically, it doesn't seem to be.
I've been advocating this for a long time. I've talked to attorneys general about it. I've talked to governors about it. Basically, hypoxia, which is what pilots experience in a rapid decompression above 10,000 feet. They lose oxygen, they go to sleep, and they die peacefully. This is Payne Stewart, the golfer's airplane. This is people on board jetliners who've perished that way. Why can we not convert, say, the gas chamber into a hypoxia chamber, which either bleeds out oxygen, replaces it with nitrogen, and do it that way? No exotic cocktails. Nobody has to administer any exotic drugs. No IV. just deplete the oxygen, the condemned falls asleep and dies?
Well, John, I have to go back to what I said a moment ago, and that is we don't know whether in the application of executing someone, those same things happen. And it is simply because Payne Stewart had no idea that he was slowly suffocating to death. If somebody knows that they are suffocating to death, it will be a struggle, it will be painful.
When I talk about this, what I get back is on social media. Why do we care so much about the discomfort of the condemned when they had no such charity to their victims?
Okay. Well, that's a question that is maybe not associated with what I was asked by the governor. And so if that question had been asked of me when I was the independent review commissioner, I would not have answered it, because I don't think it's more closer to the question, should we have a death penalty? And that was not my assignment. My assignment was to find out what went wrong before, can it be done safely, and increase transparency. But since I'm no longer the death penalty review commissioner, I will tell you that I think that it does no honor to us as a people to take the life of someone in a heinous way. We really want people to see examples of what you should do in life. And oftentimes the people that are being executed are not really the same people who committed the heinous crime.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. I witnessed a death penalty and execution here in Arizona, and the condemned in that case was a completely different person than he was when he killed 4 people when he was 23 years old. That was the one part of it that I struggled with. Carrying out the penalty did not bother me, but I did say that guy on the table is a different guy than the guy who committed those crimes when he was a young man.
I mean, you have letters from correctional officers who are working with these people on the daily basis to the Commutation Commission saying, commute this man's sentence because he does not deserve to die today. It's
pretty clear that both the governor and the attorney general are not proponents of the death penalty. I mean, I asked Chris Mays point blank during the campaign, and she said, I'm going to carry out the will of Arizonans. They've both kind of said that. I don't think they're not in favor of the death penalty. Do you feel like your investigation was a way to slow walk this thing to halt executions in Arizona as long as they could? And obviously the political winds have changed a bit with this last election. Do you think that plays into this?
I think the political winds could be playing into it, but I don't know for sure because I don't have a crystal ball. But to answer the other part of your question, there was no subterfuge at the beginning. Duncan, you're just being retained to slow this thing down. In fact, the contract called for me to finish by March of 2025, and I had interviewed the victims, the family members of the people who had been murdered, and I believed that I should do everything in my power to deliver the work product that the governor wanted as soon as possible, and I committed to do it by the end of the summer of 2024.
Final thing, your biggest takeaway from this, and will you release the report yourself to get your point of view out there?
Yeah. The final takeaway is I am worried about the effect of efforts to obtain the opinions of independent reviewers in the future. I don't know that you'll find people with the backgrounds and the stature to do it if it just appears to be a fool's errand that you deliver truth. You know, as Harry Truman said, you know, I didn't set out to make people mad as hell. I simply just told the truth, and that made them mad as hell. I mean, you want people who do this job to follow the truth wherever it leads. With respect to the report, I am going to publish, whether it's in a law review, it'll be different than what I had done for the governor because it'll focus on Arizona and not on other states' experiences. But I do think I should share, and I think the governor probably would agree because she was interested in transparency. The transparency will help, I hope, people going down the road to do a better job in what has proven to be a very difficult avenue to head down.
Judge David Duncan, thank you, and thank you for your work and dedication to that issue. I sense from you talking to you, you put a lot into it. It should see the light of day.
I simply wanted to be interviewing the doctors and to watch the execution because I knew that I had learned a lot, and I knew that the doctors had never done it before. And I'm not a doctor, but I might have been able to say, hey, I've learned this.
Yeah,
but thank you very much for having me.
Judge, thank you very much.